Welcome to Fast Cars, Fast Girls. We are your IndyCar experience or your, um, I guess, quarantine experience at this
Yeah,
point.
social
But
distancing.
yeah, but during this fun time of iRacing and staying at home and losing the base hands that some of us worked on before St. Pete, we are discussing, well, a little bit of everything with one of our favorite people in the paddock. Today we've got Mr. Charlie Kimball with us. Charlie,
Woo!
And the crowd goes, wow. Thanks for having us. Thanks for having me. I'd say us, but you'll probably just hear screaming from my toddler in the background and maybe crying from the baby in the background. So it's really me. It's just you get extra audio from my family at home.
It's a bonus.
absolutely, and shout out to Kathleen for doing what she can to wrangle the kids during this.
Yeah, I appreciate the scheduling because we try and work it when I'm real efficient in chunks of time when Hannah, who's now 18 months old, is down for a nap or down for quiet time or after she goes to bed. She's a great little sleeper, gets like 12 hours of sleep at night. So like I have to be real efficient when she's napping, either a workout or a gym workout, hashtag pit fit at home, or office work or housework or whatever it is I need to do to support Kathleen while she's sustaining human life with our little boy who's just over a month old.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
That's
which
right.
oh my goodness, what I've actually said this because I've got a friend who gave birth about a month ago as well, and so off air we were just chatting with Charlie about how different life is right now, but especially with a new baby, it's so hard because you don't really have a support system because nobody can come over and see you.
Yeah,
Whereas
that
normally you'd have a baby and you'd have family, and I say Kathleen's family's here, aren't they?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so
So
you normally have all these people like extra hands and watching Hannah and helping you guys get extra sleep and bringing meals and yeah.
100%. So we knew it was going to be hard. Having two kids under the age of 18 months was always going to be a challenge. And I guess the one blessing about the first, month and a half of the IndyCar season, 2 months, I guess now, 2.5 months
Oh,
of the IndyCar season being postponed, reshuffled, canceled, any mix and combo of those three, is that Gordon, our son, was born on the Wednesday, and I left Thursday morning to go down to St. Pete. So we always knew that I wasn't going to be at home for the early part of Gordon's life, or I was going to be in and out between races. This quarantine and stay at home has meant that I've gotten that sort of unexpected paternity leave. Wasn't something I was planning on, or especially something I would have hoped for, but it is one of the small blessings in disguise about this situation. But like you say, the help, we always knew it was going to be challenging, but not having the ability for my mother-in-law, who lives a few miles down the road, to come over and spend time, if it's with our little one or with Hannah. I've started calling her Hannah the Hurricane because she is full energy all the time.
Oh yeah.
If it's chasing and cleaning up after the hurricane, or whatever that is, bringing meals, or just doing dishes, like stuff like that.
Doing
And
laundry, yeah.
yes, yeah, baby laundry. I forgot how many clothes a newborn goes through. Like
Every day.
Every day it's a
like
thing.
It's like 3 or 4 outfits a day, easy. Easy.
And that doesn't include the surprise blowout.
Yeah.
Oh, the blowouts and the spit up, and this conversation has taken a very strange right turn. But
It's every
you
conversation.
talk
It's fine.
about the lack of help. My mom had planned. My parents had come down to St. Pete, and after the initial ruling of the race not being open to the public, they changed their flights, came here to Indianapolis, and spent a few days visiting their new grandson before flying back to California. Well, when we got canceled, the race got fully canceled, and I got home Friday night, got a couple of days with them, and then they went back to California. And my mom was planning on coming back a week later for like 10 days. And
yeah.
that just
Yeah.
all got scrubbed. And so we planned on having this help. And it's hard. Like, you think, with they say what it takes a village. Well, when that village is socially distant, it's a little hard to use that village.
Oh,
Absolutely.
oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that is.
it is nice that you kind of got a surprise paternity leave because yeah, you actually get to spend a lot of time at home with the new babe. So that's not
Yeah,
usually the case.
and that's something that I wouldn't ever give back. And I know a lot of the IndyCar drivers either had or managed to get before the stay-at-home orders, like full sim racing and iRacing rigs. Some have like IKEA boxes that pedals are set on and things like that. And I will tell you, I have never been any good at video games. In fact, I was discussing, with a former spotter of mine, how bad we shared a house or an apartment when I first moved to Indiana. And I was awful at video games. And he used to look at me and be like, you make your living with the hand-eye coordination. And I was like, yeah, but it's hand, eye, and gut, and like belted in, and there's a lot more sensation that happens in the race car than a video game, or even a sim like iRacing. So I was never any good at it. I'd never done it, and I just don't have any of the equipment. And if I spent 6 or 8 hours a day, which is what it would take for me to get up to speed on iRacing,
Kathleen
there would
kill
be.
You.
It really wouldn't matter how I did in an iRace because I wouldn't be alive to enjoy the victory.
Yeah, I'm like
Yeah.
Kathleen would kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah. My younger sister spaced out her kids like you guys did, and yeah, I'm like she's about a year ahead in the process, but still just as busy. And I'm like, oh, if her husband was like, hey, I'm gonna spend more time playing video games, she'd be like, oh, I think the fuck you're not.
And I, from my side, like I totally get the IndyCar iRacing challenge, and I've been watching. And this last weekend, I was listening to the team speak. So I was listening to Chris Wheeler talk to Bourdais, and listening to the sort of chatter between the performance engineers on the backside and the fuel numbers on the 4 car and things like that. And that, along with the live stream of what was happening and the broadcast, was just about enough inputs to keep me interested with how things were going. And the only reason I was able to do that was because Hannah was napping. So
yeah.
I wasn't chasing a hurricane or a tornado around the living room.
I think Abby and I both would agree and understand the whole, like, eye-hand coordination in one area does not always translate to eye-hand coordination in another. So no, I get that. And yeah, I kind of think those new dad again duties, they kind of come first. And yeah, we'd like to keep Kathleen happy. She's a lovely thing.
And like I said, I would not give back this time.
Oh, absolutely.
I've had to be there for Kathleen and with Gordon and with Hannah. And in watching Hannah grow, she sort of hit this inflection point in her development, and where she was kind of going along and her vocabulary was about the same. And then in the last 2 weeks, she just kind of hit this like development spurt, and her vocabulary has just exploded. And if you say a word, she tries to repeat it. And I know to her ear and her mind, it sounds exactly the same.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds nothing like it, but she is trying and she is making the sounds and mimicking us. And we got dinner delivered last night because by the time dinner rolled around, Kathleen and I looked at each other and went, we haven't thought about anything. Maybe we'll just support a local business tonight. And we got ramen, and I picked up the bowl and was drinking the broth out of the bowl. and I look over, and Hannah had her bowl of little noodles. She had picked it up and was like pouring noodles all over her face.
Oh my
It's like,
God.
oh yeah, we've hit that monkey see, monkey do
Oh no.
part of
Oh,
our
yeah.
development.
Oh.
Oh, that's hilarious. My my sister and her husband both have bad allergies, and so well, and everybody in my family, like, there's a box of Kleenex in every room of everybody's house. I mean, bedroom, living room, bathroom. There's not a room in the house that doesn't have a box of Kleenex somewhere. And so yeah, her oldest is getting ready to be 2 at the beginning of May, and she sent a video. And she goes, "When your parents both have allergies," and it was her daughter was about 20 months old, and just walked over to the Kleenex box, picked one up, fake blew her nose, put it in the trash, then walked back to the Kleenex box, picked one up, fake blew her nose, put it in the trash, just over and over. And I'm like, this, yeah, it's such a fun age too. I always say, like, starting at 18 months is my favorite because they look like little miniature humans, and they start mimicking everything, and they're just curious and learning about the world. It's that's one of my favorite age starts, is that 18-month mark.
Yeah, and when she got out of, like, I went in and got her out of her crib one morning last week, and I looked at her and went, when did you become a person? Like, you definitely went baby to toddler to, like, miniature person.
Yeah. That's exactly what I'm like. Oh, give me all of the kids that, like, look like little miniature humans and are just starting to talk. I speak fluent toddler.
It is nice.
I love it. Okay, so Gordon,
Yes.
I want to know, is that a family name? How'd you guys decide on it?
It is. So our little Gordon is named after my father, Gordon.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
And great story. So our Gordon would be, it's not technically the third because it's not, like, directly descendant. So our Gordon's named after his grandfather, my father, Gordon. Now, my father, Gordon, was named after his uncle. So my namesake, Charles, his brother was named Gordon and was a few years older than my grandfather was, and was in the ROTC in the 40s, I believe, and got 11 or 12 semesters. Is that right? 11 or 12 quarters, excuse me, into a chemical engineering degree at Stanford when World War II hit. And he, because of his ROTC service, ended up on a B-29 Stratofortress plane as a navigator and was killed in service in World War II on Guam. The B-29 took off in a storm, and just after takeoff, they scrubbed the mission. They were coming back into land, and apparently, from what I remember from the story, this is second or third retelling, so it may not be accurate, but there are 2 runways sort of side by side, and as they were coming into land on their prescribed runway, another B-29 that was coming into land on the other runway misaligned onto their runway. So to avoid taking both planes out, the plane that my dad's Uncle Gordon was on crashed and killed all but one of the people on board, including our Gordon's namesake, Gordon Kimball. So,
oh, wow.
It's pretty cool. From doing some research, there's a marker in Arlington Cemetery with his name on it and his crewmate's name from that B-29 crash. And so when my dad was born, he was the eldest, born to Charles, my grandfather, and my grandmother. And Charles named him after his older brother who'd been killed in the war and named him Gordon.
Yeah.
That is a really great namesake, then. That's super
yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
And it's fun because both our kids' names are family names. So Hannah was Kathleen's great grandmother's name, and her middle name takes after my grandmother. So there's some family names kind of woven throughout our kids' names, and I like them because they're traditional names. Like, we'll probably end up calling Gordon Gordy or Don, or Who knows? Or Hey You, depending on what's
Yep.
going on.
Depending on the
And
teenage years.
exactly, yeah. Yeah, or some more blue names, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great, because one of the challenges Kathleen and I felt was you're naming future adults.
Yes.
So, and I remember how mean kids are. So it is terrifying choosing a name and thinking, okay, we don't want you to be made fun of as a kid or not be taken seriously as an adult either.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, because there's certain names that, yeah, it's like, how's that going to translate as an adult? My mom did the same thing. She gave my sister and I, so I'm actually, my given name is Abigail, but I go by Abby. And the reason she always called me Abby, she was, I only got called Abigail when I was in trouble, and it was all my
The
names.
full name. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the full name. But, she wanted me to have the option of having a longer, more professional name as an adult if I wanted to.
Yep.
And but yeah, I love the family names, when it's a couple generations separated, because then it's not a junior, it's not, whatever, but it still has, it's woven through. So,
Yeah.
like your dad was a Gordon, obviously Charles is a family name, and then now you've got a little Gordon, and yeah, I think that's great. I love it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and as busy as it is, and as tired as we are, and as much chaos as there seems to be, I can't wait for these two kids to grow up best of friends and be at the racetrack together. And I mean, Hannah is just the little ringleader with, when we could play with neighbor kids and friends, like even kids that are years older than her, she just leads the way and everyone falls in line. I mean, it's
I love
amazing.
it. I
That's
love
awesome. That's
it. Having met your wife, I don't know where she would get that just
Mm-mm.
like take charge of the crowd leadership from. I have no idea.
We do have a friend who refers to her almost exclusively as Boss Kimball. And it's hilarious because he's executive director and founder of a very successful nonprofit here in town, here in Indy, and he refers to her almost exclusively as Boss Kimball.
That's fantastic.
I mean,
Yeah.
it does. Yeah, it makes sense. Oh my gosh, yeah. In the email, when we emailed Anne about setting something up, she, immediately copied Kathleen on it, and so, I was responding back, and I was like, Kathleen, try not to be pregnant the next time that we offer you a beer. And then Molly and I laughed because, when we saw you guys at Pocono, we're, of course, being Hoosier hospitality, and we're a little tipsy. And so we're basically like trying to force feed your wife a beer because we're like, no, grab a drink here. You want this? You want this? And finally she like leans in and whispers, she's like, yeah, like we're not telling everybody right now, but I'm pregnant, so I can't drink. And we were like, got it. Okay, sorry, our bad.
Yeah.
Would you like some water?
Right. We're like, would you like some water or, a Sprite or, and we laughed. I'm like, of course we would be trying to like push beer on somebody who's pregnant and not even realize it.
Well, that's like the hardest part is, or was while she was pregnant, because she's the one who introduced me to bourbon and old fashions, and like forever I didn't really enjoy a good bourbon because they all tasted like rocket fuel.
Yep.
And Kathleen, taught me how to make an old fashioned and taught me what to be tasting and thinking about and looking for in bourbons. And now, okay, it's not as good as Mr. Rossi or Mr. Hinchcliffe's bourbon collection, but we have a few bourbons that we enjoy and have a couple that are in the back of the cabinet for special occasions. And that was something that she said, especially in the winter, that is really good bourbon season. When it's old, and what does she call it? The Kentucky hug. Hug from a good bourbon or an old fashioned. She said during the winter that was hard. But we also we talked a little bit before we came on air about some of the perks of driving for AJ Foyt Racing. And the obvious ones, I mean, Driving for a Legend, the first
yeah.
4-time winner of the Indianapolis 500, the Coyote Enterprises name and logo, and just that Foyt name. There are, I would say, probably one or two handfuls of names in motorsports, not in IndyCar, but in motorsports, that are as evocative as the Foyt name. I think Foyt, Gurney, Andretti, Rutherford, Mears, Schumacher, Senna, Prost, Petty, Unser, Andretti, or Earnhardt, excuse me. There are very few out there that you say the name, and no matter if people are race fans or not, they know who you're talking about, and AJ Foyt is one of them.
Oh yeah.
I would say AJ Foyt is in the top 3 of those names as well.
Who would be your top 3 for globally recognized motorsports last names?
Senna, Foyt, and Andretti.
Okay.
That'd be mine. And somewhere my father just cried because I said Andretti, but that's okay. He just has to deal with it.
No, he just spit is what he did.
Okay.
He was a hardcore Foyt.
He is a hardcore.
He is, not was, is. For me, I'd be torn. I'd probably have to do 4 and say Senna and Schumacher. But Foyt and Andretti as well. Although, I mean, I don't know. You hit all of them, honestly, Charlie.
Yeah. I mean, that's the list.
Yeah.
And losing Sir Sterling Moss earlier this week was tough.
Gosh, that was hard.
He's another name. John Surtees, Graham Hill. I mentioned Gurney.
My dad would say Shelby.
Shelby. I mean, and then you talk about like Wally for the drag racing, the hot rodders that started in Southern California and grew into the NHRA, and names like Force and Prudhomme, and
I was gonna say I feel like the name Force is up there as well.
It's a little like when you talk about very appropriate names for racing drivers. I mean, John Force is like the other one that like all the time when I raced go-karts against him, I was like, there's no way that's his real name, is Scott Speed.
Oh, yeah, that's true, yeah.
and then I get to IndyCar and I'm racing a dude named Will Power. Like,
you're like, what the hell?
I mean, that's like ordained for him to be a racing driver, right?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Oh, I got sidetracked. Oh, I was talking about...
Yeah, so you're talking about bonus benefits, which I'm going to tell a quick story that happened at the winery, so it'll lead into your benefits. So Molly's dad is a huge AJ Foyt fan, always has been. And Molly and I got to interview Larry, just do a little, Q&A at the winery last May for an IndyCar Nation event, which Larry Foyt is fantastic. I'm sure you're enjoying working with him. He's a great guy, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, like, best hot lap driver ever. Every time I ride with him, I'm like, I might die during this, and that's okay, because this is fantastic. He's a wild man, and I love it. But AJ Foyt happened to show up for a meeting in the back office during this event, and I was standing outside, and I see him pull up, and I was like, oh my God, I have to get in there and tell Molly's dad so that he can prepare himself mentally for this. And so I run to the door, and I get there at the same time as AJ Foyt, and of course he's consummate Southern gentleman, and opens the door, and he's like, ma'am, and I was like, thank you, Mr. Foyt. And walk in all calmly, and then as soon as I'm out of eyesight, I just book it to the other end of the winery, and I was like, AJ Foyt is here. AJ Foyt is here. So we do our thing, and they have their meeting, and then afterwards he comes out, and of course, he's getting swarmed by everybody, because all the peepaws and and so I let the crowd die down, and I walk over and I said, hey, I introduced myself, and I was like, I know that you're here working and that, you've got things to do and I don't want to take up too much of your time. I said, but my best friend's dad is here and he has been a lifelong fan of yours. You are his absolute favorite driver. Da da da. I was like, and it would just mean the world to him if I could get a picture of him and you. And AJ's like, okay, but I can tell he's not really that into it. And I lean in and I said, no, when I say he's a huge fan of yours, I mean, if somebody says the name Andretti, he spits on the ground. And AJ Foyt laughed and he goes, yeah, bring him over.
That's awesome.
And I was like, yes.
Other than the chance to just swap stories with a legend like AJ Foyt when I'm in the race shop, drive for a legend, pick his brain about, the fact that he qualified for the Indy 500 in how many different decades, all of those things. Working with Larry and Anthony on at Foyt Wines is a huge perk. We bought some wine and it got delivered last week, and that has helped get us through the chaos of this stay-at-home quarantine, because it's really good wine, and the bottles are really neat because they all tell a story. They've all got a car number or a year number associated with them. Some of our neighbors found out we were ordering a box of wine from Foyt Wines. Sorry, not a box of wine, because they don't do box wines, but a box with wine bottles from
Foyt Wines.
Right. We didn't order quite that much. We didn't get a full case, but they were like, oh, we're looking on the website, and that bottle's really cool. We have no idea if the wine's good, but the bottle's really cool. Can we get one of those? And one of them, it's funny because one of them, our neighbor was like, we were looking through, and the Tony Kanaan bottle is gorgeous. And so they got it, and they go, hey, you're friends with TK, right? I'm like, well, yeah, no. And they're like, do you think when we can actually see people, you could get this bottle signed for us? I'm like, sure. And if you drink the wine first, he'll sign an empty bottle just like he'll sign a full bottle.
That's nice. I'm glad that and since we're in quarantine, go ahead and drink that first, because maybe you'll need it.
Right, exactly. So that's a big perk. It's good wine. I think it's foytwines.com if anybody is interested in ordering some good wine. And I was actually really impressed. And I know Larry's working on a new location, a new winery, I think in Texas, as well as their Napa side, plus the wine vault here in Speedway.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. I wonder where in Texas. I say if it was close to the Texas Motor Speedway, that would be fantastic for us.
I think it might be a little closer to home for him, so it would have been closer to Austin than it would be to the DFW Metroplex.
Yeah.
That's all right. We can stop by for the Austin race too.
We'll make a day trip out of it.
Right. Well, we will drive anywhere for a winery. Which, speaking of, since you and Kathleen love bourbon, our race family from Pennsylvania. I believe the one the best is Young Jackson.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, Young Jackson.
Your personal super fan. And
I think one of my most ardent supporters is how I refer to Jackson, because Alex and Jackson, they're good dudes, and the fact that they mow lawns to pay for tires for their quarter midgets is admirable, and I think it bodes well for the future of the country and the future of motorsports when young guys like that have a motivation to do something they enjoy, and aren't afraid of the hard work to get there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they mowed lawns. There was a picture that Alex posted on Facebook. He and Jackson were doing yard work and spreading mulch for one of their neighbors who's high risk right now. Alex detailed cars last season to earn money, and as a sponsorship benefit to some of the people that had supported him, he went over to their house. I mean, it spent hours detailing their cars. One of the people, one of their sponsors actually said that they were like, I don't think my car looked this good when I bought it. And so, yeah, no, it's just awesome. They're definitely not afraid of hard work. And yeah, they're great. But our Pennsylvania family, we do a bourbon trail trip occasionally. So we just did one this past November, but next time we'll let you and Kathleen know, and you're welcome to join us because it's just a weekend of drinking bourbon and just jacking around.
It's the Bourbon Trail is one. So we, after Sonoma a few years, we spent a couple of days, 3 or 4 years in a row, and went wine tasting and ended up on, I think, too many wine club memberships and bought too much wine. So we have a fairly decent stock in the basement, but we've only done the Bourbon Trail really once, and it was a ball. And it's when I really started to understand the different notes of bourbon and the types of bourbon I like versus the types of bourbon Kathleen likes. And it's interesting because during the season I don't really drink,
Sure.
and so it balances out. I drive when I'm not drinking during the season. I'll drive home from dinner or a trip to the bar or whatever, which happens less now with kids, obviously. But then during the off season, she repays the favor and will drive me home more often. So it's kind of a little bit of a give and take.
See, right there, that's a successful relationship.
Indeed. And although I feel like I've gotten to take a little more advantage of it with her being pregnant for the last few months, but hopefully we can get through this pandemic and stuff starts to loosen up. I know science and research is working nonstop on mitigation methods and more than just social distancing and sort of social methodology, but medical and science working towards treatment options and vaccinations and cures and things like that. And I look forward to that day for when we can get back to what the new normal looks like and get back to, instead of ordering dinner to support local restaurants, going and supporting servers there in person.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
To me, that's like, I'm stuck at home and it's hard, but I hope and I know eventually we'll get back in the car this year and go racing. For a lot of people that aren't as fortunate as that, it's really hard living, off tips, living in the restaurant, hospitality, tourism industry. It's tough right now. And I know a lot of people are working creatively to try and find ways to help those people stay afloat.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as a former server, I'll tell all of you, when you are able to go back out and support your local businesses, 10% is not an appropriate tip. The server wage has not changed since the 1970s. It is still $2.13 an hour, and they've all been off work. So,
maybe we tip well.
Yeah,
very well.
Minimum 20% is all I'm saying. In fact, I'll tell you this: if it's a restaurant you go to all the time, if you tip more than 20% every time, you will get the best service every time you come in. You will get treated like royalty. I guarantee it. I did it to every one of my regulars. In fact, servers will fight over taking care of your table if you tip at least 25%. So.
And it's interesting. I've always found that friends of mine who worked in restaurants or servers or hosts or hostesses, that they are so adamant and vocal about how well they tip. And if you go out with 4 couples, for example, and they you split the check 4 ways and they kind of glance around at what people are tipping. And if they don't think it's enough as a group, they'll inflate their tip to cover what the table should tip.
100%.
And we'll tell you they're doing it and tell you that exact story why.
Yep. It depends on the crowd I'm in, whether I will verbalize that I'm doing it. But yeah, I always do that. In fact, I've done it on dates. When I'm not even the one who paid, if I see that they're a shitty tipper, first off, that's our last date. One and done. If you're a shitty tipper, you're not seeing Abby Meyer again. Believe that. But there was one time that it was an awful date all around. We went to a Fridays and the guy was like, I've never been to a Fridays. And I was like, were you raised by wolves? Like, I mean, you've never been to a Fridays. And we have a whole discussion about the menu, and I'm like, well, this is pretty good, and this is pretty good, and this and da da da. And then I ordered my meal, and he literally ordered exactly what I ordered. And so I was like, well, you seem boring already. Uh, like you've never been here, and you order the exact same thing I ordered. But whatever. And then we get to the end, and he tipped like 15%. And so I was like, well, we'll just say goodbye here at the table because I need to use the restroom before I go, da da da. And he was like, okay. So like we say goodbye, and he's like, let's do this again. And I was like, sure. And in my head, no. And so as I'm walking to the restroom, I grab I grabbed my server, and I was like, hey, I'm not leaving. He left a shitty tip, so can you ring up like something that's $1 so that I can give you my credit card and actually give you a decent tip?
That's awesome.
I was like, I'll be right back. Like, here's my card. I was like, I'm just not having a conversation with this person about it. But I was like, you guys did great work, and I want to make sure that you get compensated for that.
I'm just going to go ahead and take care of you, even though he didn't.
Yeah.
Right? I was like, yeah. And then she laughed. She was like, first date? I was like, yeah. And she goes, last date? I was like, yep.
Also, yes.
Yep, 2 for 2.
Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll tell you, and something that, so everybody knows I'm a nurse, and we chatted a little bit offline about some things. But I was at work a week or two ago, and, we were all talking about what who brought lunch and what we're going to get and this and that. And I'm currently on night shift right now. So it's like those discussions have to happen early in the shift because we start at 7 p.m. And so it's, we can't exactly order things at, 1 or 2 in the morning. And it was really cool to me that all of these other nurses start talking about, well, which local business do we want to support tonight? Who are we going to order from? And I was like, that is awesome that, although we have a very hard job right now, we are still blessed in the fact that we are able to work and able to earn a paycheck. And I was like, in the midst of all this craziness and all this stress that we have at work, these nurses are literally thinking about what local restaurant that's close to our hospital that we can support right now.
Yeah.
I was like, this is just the epitome of like what I love about Hoosiers right here. I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
The Indy Star, I think Greg Doyle wrote it. I haven't read the article yet, but there's an article, and the headline was, the COVID-19's taken a lot from us, but it hasn't taken our Hoosier hospitality. And I think that is very true. And it's one of the reasons why Kathleen and I love living here. And we talk about being Californian Hoosiers, because while we're both from California and our roots are still there, we've grown and blossomed and started our family here, and we love Central Indiana, and we love living here and contributing to the community. And my grandmother, we call her, because she's an avocado farmer, we call her a steel avocado instead of a steel magnolia.
I love
it.
She's always said, invest in the community that you want to live in. And I think now more than ever is an important time to remember that.
I agree. I like that. Invest in the community you want to live in.
That is very profound. My goodness.
Yeah. Very good words from the steel avocado.
Yes.
She's quite the matriarch, and she has been doing a really good job of staying at home and letting my sister and other lower risk people do porch drops for food and for office supplies. And I guess the weather was pretty decent over the weekend. And so my sister and brother-in-law sat on the porch, and she sat inside, and they chatted at kind of elevated volumes through the open glass door for an hour or two because she hasn't been out in a month.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's good.
And it's not that she can't get out. She lives at home by herself, but she can, she still drives everywhere. And I think she still drives to the post office and stuff like that. But it's like that social interaction. I think it's a good reminder. It made me laugh that the roles have reversed, and instead of parents telling kids to stay at home and be home at a certain time, it's kids telling parents to stay home at the moment.
Yep.
Right. It is. It is. Oh, yeah. my brother-in-law is having a conversation with his parents this week at my sister's request because they have not been staying at home as much as they should. And my sister was basically like, listen, my sister's a nurse and I'm not playing this game because my sister's been, she's a stay-at-home mom. So she works inside the home every day. But she's always been very good about getting out and, going to do things, so that she doesn't get cabin fever, and which is just impressive. To leave the house with even one child is an entire production, much less two. And
Yep.
so, but during this, she hasn't been going anywhere. And so she's got cabin fever. And, they have been seeing my mom because she's high risk. So she hadn't been anywhere, having groceries delivered and all that jazz. And, and they have been going to see his parents. But his parents talked about, they're like, oh, well, we went out to Menards and we did this. And like, they've been like going out and getting stuff and like doing home improvements. And she was finally like, yeah, if you want to keep seeing my kids, you're going to have to stay home. Because you keep going out and exposing yourself, like, we're not coming over. Because
Yeah, we were talking about a home improvement project, and it's like, only if we can figure out how to get everything we would ever need delivered,
right,
and then and I could YouTube the how-to on how to get it done. That's the only way we're gonna do it.
Totally.
Yep.
Totally. I know there's a couple different things that I'm like, ooh, that's a craft I'd like to get into. I'm like, but I'm not going out to a craft store. That's not essential. All right, can I buy this on Amazon?
Yep. When's it gonna come now?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into a little bit of racing talk. In addition to just you loving working with AJ Foyt. And I say, and the rest of the team. So when it was rumored that you were going to go to AJ Foyt, and and the silly season this year was, almost as exciting as the regular season. It was quite wild. In fact, I would say it was as wild as Turn 1 at Portland. Turn 1, lap 1. And I know.
I don't think it got as backwards as Turn 1, lap 1.
That's true. That's fair. But when it wasn't official that you're going to AJ Foyt, of course, we have multiple group texts with racing fans where we discuss everything, and in addition to our show, where we discuss everything. Yeah. And somebody said, what do you think about Charlie Kimball and AJ Foyt? And I said, I think that would be the smartest decision for AJ Foyt Racing to make. I'm like, number one, you're a solid driver. You bring the car home. You may not get a podium every week, but you're not crashing. You're not making stupid mistakes. Like, you are a solid finisher. You're a smart guy. I'm like, and let's talk about, again, how freaking smart you are. You're an engineer. I'm like, they, have had some, just some missteps and just haven't quite had, the speed and the team and the results that they've wanted. And I'm like, you bring Charlie Kimball in. I said, whether it's official or not, I know that he's going to want to know every little piece of what's going into it, whether you're officially part of the engineering part or not. You're going to involve yourself. And then, when it was official and it was like, and Charlie's going to help with engineering, I'm like, and no one was surprised, because of course he is. He's one of the, you're one of the smartest guys on our paddock. And so I love that. So how's that been going, even though you haven't really been in the car?
How's that going as that driving?
In the off season, was there, have there been kind of some engineering planning and things like that?
Oh, absolutely. We've worked really closely, and my race engineer, Mike Pulowski, has worked. I worked with him or across the table from him. He was at Chip Ganassi Racing for a little bit when I was there, and he's come from a lot of different places with a lot of different perspectives within the paddock, and being able to lend my perspective and my engineering brain. You called me an engineer, but I haven't even played one on TV. There are a lot of people that have spent a lot of hours in colleges and practical applications learning. So I would say I'm engineering minded. I'm not actually an engineer. I just know how to speak it, having grown up with one in the house as my dad. And so that really helps on the communication side, working with Mike and Mike Collifer and Daniele and all of the performance engineers over there. Because AJ Foyt's kind of this, it's a unique size as a two-car operation. It's not a huge race team.
Sure.
I think you talk about some of the big teams, even if Roger Penske and Penske Racing was only running 2 Indy cars, you wouldn't call them a small team because of the amount of cars they run in NASCAR and in sports car.
Absolutely.
And even when Chip Ganassi Racing was only running 2 Indy cars, they're still a big team because of their sports car program, their NASCAR program, and so on and so forth. And AJ Foyt, as a two-car team, they're not a small team. I mean, I don't think they're a sort of young IndyCar startup like Carlin was when I started with them, but they're not a big team either. And so they're this really nice family feel operation that has the ability, I believe, or else I wouldn't be racing for them, to grow and develop into a really strong, really solid engineering foundational team that brings good to great results consistently.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
And
by the way,
go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to say it may take a little time because I think fresh perspectives always take a little time to find their rhythm. And it takes a little while to get an oil tanker slowed down and turned around and headed in a different direction and pick up steam going the right way. But I think that's the nice thing is if we can work consistently and intelligently to lay the foundation, it lends itself to long-term consistent growth. We don't want, we would love to have a flash in the pan result, but we also want to know how we did it and we can replicate it year after year, race after race.
Yeah, you don't want that.
I hire you to come talk to my team at work, please, Charlie? That was inspiring, and I need them all to know that's perfect. It's the whole we have to build the base, get the floor in, turn the tanker, and then build. That was awesome.
Yeah. Funnily enough, I do professional speaking. I don't know if you can tell. But yeah, I enjoy the mental aspect of the engine side and working with engineers because it's what I think separates or is one of the differentiators of me as a driver. It's a cerebral piece that I bring to the sport and the industry itself.
Absolutely. Oh yeah,
I agree. Well, and one of the things, it's funny that this is the first time we've actually got you recorded because we've chatted with you many times for happy hours and other fun like IndyCar Nation events and stuff for us. But one of the things that I really enjoyed last season with you was at Barber when you were with Carlin, and so you had the rideshare, which by the way, congratulations on a full-time gig this season. Pretty exciting.
Whatever time looks like in 2020.
Well,
right, yeah, quote unquote full time, yeah.
Full-time, yeah.
Right.
Will it be 15 races? Will it be 3? We don't know.
We'll find out.
But but yeah. So at Barber, we chatted with you and Max Chilton and Pato Award. Just the way that you were able to break everything down and kind of do this very in-depth analysis of what you were seeing on track and what was going on and this and that, but to say it in a way that made perfect sense to everyone regardless of their background. You very much know how to speak engineer, but you also know how to break that down for the everyday person. And I've enjoyed all our interactions, but that one especially, I was like, every time I talk to you, I'm just more and more impressed. And I was like, I also now want to sit right next to Charlie Kimball during a race and hear his commentary and everything. Like, I feel like I would just be taking notes furiously, like in a college class.
Well, and if I can plug your Instagram, that was one of my favorite things last year is how you would break stuff down and hopefully when this gets started, I'm going to speak positively. When we get started, I hope you continue to do that because your Instagram stories of like breaking the tracks down and qualifying and tires, it was great for, those who don't have that great kind of like background in IndyCar or, have grown up around engineering. It was fantastic. So if you're not following him on Instagram, everybody should be.
And I appreciate that. And a lot of that was, I will give credit where credit's due here, was Kathleen, because she didn't know a whole lot about IndyCar racing. And so while I was racing and driving, learned a lot about the sport from my dad. And that's how he taught it. She would ask the questions and he would talk about different things. And I think, and both Kathleen and I think that one of the largest barriers of entry to becoming an IndyCar fan is exposure to it. Because growing up, everyone knows 3 strikes, you're out. Everyone knows 4 downs to go 10 yards. Everyone knows a free throw and a shot clock. Maybe not everyone knows icing in hockey, but I think that's maybe one of the reasons why of the big 4, they're the smallest. And in racing, not everybody knows that you have to use alternates and prime tires during the race. Not everyone knows that it's knockout qualifying and there are 3 rounds to set the grid in 3 different chunks. And so she and I talked about, especially going into last year where I wouldn't be in the car as much, if there was a way to elevate my exposure through a quote unquote IndyCar 101 education. And Kathleen's great at translating, because I would rattle off a whole lot and she goes, okay, well, could we say it like this and talk about this? And where should people be watching for the most passing on this track? If they're at the track, where should they buy a grandstand seat if they want to see the most action? Stuff like that. And I think if we can break down that barrier of entry, any of my friends at least, that have come to a racetrack to see me race, to support me, have fallen in love and watch racing. If, like last year, if I was in the car or not, they were tuning in.
Yeah, that's, it's just fantastic. And I think you're right. It's that whole lack of access and lack of terms, that if you don't know these special terms, you're like, well, I don't want to ask people, because if I don't know, maybe they'll make fun of me. And so that's absolutely great. And I'm excited that you guys have been doing that, and please continue to do that.
Yeah, please continue it. That's one of the things that we want. I mean, one of our, missions, goals on this podcast is that, we wanted it to be mission statement. Yes. We wanted it to be fan friendly to everybody, whether you're a brand new fan and you don't know, shit about shit, or whether you are a longtime fan. We wanted to kind of find this balance of, okay, there's still some bits and pieces that even longtime fans don't know. And so we love interviewing crew members and things like that to bring in that extra little bit. And, even something like that, even if you're a new fan, you hear from a crew member or a fueler, and then all of a sudden you're more invested in watching a pit stop because you heard about what a fueler does. And so it's just these little nuggets of things that make it a little bit more accessible and more easy to understand. And it doesn't have to happen all in one sitting. We brought also many people to the track. In fact, we say on our podcast all the time, I'm like, if you come to a race with us and you don't have a good time, like, I will 100% money back guarantee. I will pay you back for your ticket. Like, I've said it before, and I have never once had to pay anybody back. Like, I stand by that guarantee.
Statement, but I totally buy it.
Yeah, it's very cool about that.
So yeah, no, I love that about your Instagram, and again, another. You're a smart man with Kathleen, for marrying Kathleen. You married up. You
talk about
very smart
your coverage, right?
Yeah, like. Yeah.
Sorry.
So, way to go logging that down, because her, and just she has. I don't know what she went to school for, but she has got a natural affinity for PR and making and marketing you and your intelligence. She is fantastic.
I read somewhere at some point that she is. Is she not a Hoosier like us?
No, she's
no. So she and I went to high school together. We never dated in high school, but I joke that she has 2 degrees, one for each of us. She did her undergrad in economics at University of Southern California, and then got her MBA in marketing and entrepreneurship from the Kelley School of Business
Okay,
at
that she
IU.
is. No, so that
Really?
makes her a Hoosier then. So okay, I thought I recognized a Kelly SOB. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense then. That's why she's so good at that.
So
Um,
It
so
is.
go ahead, Molly.
I was just gonna ask you some of another. Um, who was it though that kind of? I know your father was around racing. Was he the one who kind of that's what kickstarted, or was there a racer that you really admired growing up that you were like, that's my racer, that's who I want to be when I grow up, or was it your father being around racers?
It was the exposure to racing in our house.
Mm-hmm.
Being born in England when my dad was a design engineer and a race engineer at McLaren in their Formula One program, living in Italy when my dad was an engineer and then technical director at Ferrari in their F1 program. We used to watch racing on Sundays at home to try and catch a glimpse of my dad on TV. And so I was always exposed to it. And then when, I want to say I was about 8 years old, maybe, so 93 or so, when we were back in California and my dad was working consulting in IndyCar for Dan Gurney's All American Racers, for Christmas, he gave me an old go-kart that he used to drive around the ranch when he was a kid. Well, when he went to college, his younger brothers used it and it went into storage and kind of fell into disrepair. And so he and I spent a few months working together to rebuild it and refurbish it and put a new engine in it, get it powder coated, get the parts for it. Well, part of it was we went down to a go-kart shop in Van Nuys, California, called Pitts Performance, and to pick up a seat for it. And I walked in and saw my first ever racing go-kart, and that to me that was like the go-kart to drive around the yard was fun, but I wanted to try the racing go-kart, and that was probably in March or April. And by August, I sort of kept harping on it. And
Mm-hmm.
originally, we bought the go kart and we put it in the back of my dad's his ranch pickup, and put it on a couple of 2x4s, put tires and fuel underneath it, and go to Jim Hall Jr.'s kart track in Oxnard, California. It's about 20 minutes from our house. Go practice Saturday afternoon and race on Sunday. And that's where it all went wrong. And it started there, and I got into cars at the age of 16 and kind of never looked back.
Yeah.
That is
And
fantastic.
yeah. So far, because you have a long career ahead of you still. What's probably your favorite what's that moment in your career right now that you kind of hold it up as that moment, that kind of like that's the moment you think of when you're like keep focused and whatnot.
So I had a conversation a few years ago. I was at a regulatory training meeting with my longtime partner, Novo Nordisk, and a few of their other ambassadors were there. Lightning Lou Brock, Kendall Simmons, two-time Super Bowl champion who has type 1 diabetes as well. Will Cross, who's a mountain climber, has climbed the highest peak on every continent, hiked to both poles with type 1. Some like really impressive company that I felt very underqualified to be in that group, let's be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about moments in our chosen fields that let us know we'd made it,
Mm-hmm.
and then secondarily let us know we belonged.
Yeah.
And for example, so Lou Brock, longtime baseball player, shortstop, he said he realized he'd made it when he was sitting in the dugout and watching his legends and idols walk out onto the field for player introductions.
Wow. Yeah.
And then he realized he'd made it when he caught a Stan Musial line drive And he said he was really lucky that the bases were empty because he caught it and was kind of so shocked that he caught this line drive that he just looked in his glove and the pitcher was like, "Hey Lou, we need the ball." Like,
He was like, "No, thank you, I want it."
On base, like they would have run home how long I stood there and looked at it.
Right, because he was like, I can't believe this. Just
Exactly. And for me, in racing especially, and in IndyCar, those two moments I think are a great way to talk about sort of the highlights and a great perspective to talk about when I realized I'd made it and then I realized I belonged. And the first realized I made it was driver introductions at the 2011 Indy 500. Graham Rahal was my teammate at the time, and before we walked out to driver intros, he gave me great advice. He said, look, when you get out there, take a minute, look left, look right, look up, look down, look behind you, and soak it in, because you will only ever get one first Indy 500. And every year I try and pass that advice on to a rookie and try and make sure I remember it when I walk out for intros, because there is something, okay, I'm biased, but I think the single coolest moment in sports for an athlete is driver intros at the Indy 500.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and what great advice from Graham. Like, you only get one first Indy 500. I mean, it's one of those, like when people get married, a lot of times they'll hear the advice of like, don't be so wrapped up in worrying about things going right that you don't take in, like take a breath and look around and appreciate the day and the moment. And especially, with the Indy 500, like it is just so iconic. So that's awesome. Good for you for sharing that with new rookies too.
Yeah.
And the moment I realized I belonged, we were racing at Mid-Ohio. I want to say it was like 2012. It was because 2012 I broken my hand and I didn't race. So it was later in 2011. So it was August of 2011. And I passed Tony Kanaan into turn 4, like to be in the top 5 or something. I think I ended up finishing 7th or 8th that day. But I can totally get where Lou Brock was, because I like passed him and I looked in my mirrors, was like, oh my God, that's Tony Kanaan behind me. I just passed Tony Kanaan. Like, and I don't know that I've ever told TK that story. So if you don't remind him of that, that'd be great. But
sure, if he doesn't listen, it's okay.
One of those moments. It's like, I belong. Like, no, I am here and I've earned the right to be here and I'm racing legends and that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, all of a sudden it's like, I'm not an outsider like this. Right. Yeah.
That is super cool. Oh, wow. And I like that idea of the when you've made it and when you've belonged. I'm definitely going to steal that question for future.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we've asked variations, but not the two together. So yeah, thank you for that.
I'm write that down.
Yeah. You know what? We'll give you a t-shirt. Because I'd say that we'd pay you out of our budget, but it's $0. But we'll throw a t-shirt your way for that idea, since we're going to steal it.
I'll just take half your annual budget for payment in that, because half zero is still zero.
Yeah, deal. Done deal.
We'd provide you with great wine like AJ Foyt Racing, but Abby and I, unlike you guys, are fans of the boxed variety. So
I like to say that we're frugal drinkers. Yeah. We are fans of the box wine. They're just more practical for racetracks.
It's understandable, absolutely. Well, I am hearing the hurricane and tornado spooling up in the background, so I have to return to my call.
I actually just emailed your wife, and I was like, listen, I know that Charlie is so nice, he'll talk forever, so if you need to interrupt us, please do. Okay. Well, Charlie, thank you so very much. Real quick, since we mentioned your Instagram and Twitter, where can everybody find you online?
So online, I am on Twitter at Charlie Kimball, as well as Race with Insulin. And then on Instagram, I'm at Charlie Kimball, and Facebook at Charlie Kimball as well. My website's charliekimball.com. There's a link to my merchandise page that does some really cool customized clothes based on colors and styles, things like that. We've launched some new merchandise for this year around the concept of For the Love of Racing, around the car number 4 for AJ Foyt Racing.
I love it.
I really do love racing, and I'm excited to get back to a full season. Like we said, whatever that looks like in 2020, I'll be excited for that. And I think it's going to be a good year. It's just going to be different, and the challenge for a lot of us as drivers and teams is going to be rolling with the punches and staying adaptable to things as they develop, because it's like nothing anyone has ever seen before, at least not since 1918 or so.
Well, we can't wait to cheer loudly for you. It's going to be fun.
Agreed.
We can't wait.
It's going to be a good time. And if I say it, and I'll offer this just because your kids are adorable, you know, if Kathleen needs like an hour break at a track,
we can handle them. We're ants. We got this.
We're ants. I was a nanny. Yeah. So anyhow, if she wants a little track time away from the kids, she can drop them off with us. I will. And I know that I have a foul mouth, but I can clean it up around kids. So
yes, that's true.
I will not return your daughter. I will not return your daughter and her say the F word. I promise.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a bold promise, because who knows where she's going to learn that from
that's
us,
true. It is a
from
racetrack,
from who knows.
Well, I'll just say it won't be for me. I can't promise you won't say it, but it won't be for me.
Fair enough. Well, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on, and I look forward to catching up in person at a racetrack as soon as we possibly can.
Oh, same. Thank you again, and give those kiddos some love.
Have fun.
I will. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, Charlie.
Bye.